they need to have a price. They need to be comfortable charging it, and they need to approach it in a way that they want it to be repeatable, that it gets at the customer value, and that they can make the decision in an ongoing way of, is there a sustainable business here that we're developing?
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the iterative relationship between them. I'm Mark Saving, and I run boot camps to help companies get paid more. Our guest today is Mr. Garrick van Buren. Yes, there's a space between Van and Buren. Here are 3 things you want to know about Garrick before we start. He is the owner and principal consultant at Pricing from the Start. He's been starting and running businesses since 2003, all supporting entrepreneurial organizations. And probably the most interesting thing about him is he's a certified Cicerone, which means he drinks beer. Welcome, Garrick.
Happy to be here, Mark. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. How did you get into pricing?
In my early career, I worked with a lot of professional services agencies, a lot of creative professionals, and that was something that we always struggled with: is how do we price our work? How do we price our engagements? And too often there's the starving artist stereotype, and I saw too much of that, and I was too much of that. And then in 2017, I joined a really large corporation that had a very mature pricing practice in it throughout the organization. And that's how I was introduced to it as a practice and being able to critically look at it. And so I started blending some of that thinking into my how I think about customer research, how I think about product development, and at the same time was bumping into more and more early stage entrepreneurs that were either completely punting on pricing or didn't know how to approach it and didn't know how to craft what pricing might look like before they over-invested into a product. And I thought, well, I think I can figure this out, and I think I can help substantially. And I know the pain of not figuring this out. And now I have some tools that I think I can apply to these problems and really make substantial impact on their businesses in a short time frame.
So do you think most entrepreneurs, or let's say we've just launched a new product, or we're just developing a new product, do you think that they really need to know what price it's going to be? Or do you think they need to know a ballpark that there's demand if we charge a price, something like that?
Yeah, they need to have a price, need to be comfortable charging it, and they need to approach it in a way that they want it to be repeatable, that it gets at the customer value, and that they can make the decision in an ongoing way of, is there a sustainable business here that we're developing? I think for too long, entrepreneurs have punted on that, and it could be for any number of reasons. One is that in a lot of the circles that I travel in, there was one for a very long time, a strong bias to go after investment ahead of sales, which can really, really blur who the customer is and who you're developing for and who has control of which direction the business is going. And the second is for some founders, this is the first time they're even in a sales capacity. and some of them will cringe at me characterizing it that way, but they are, and they need to come to terms with that as quickly as possible. I think for especially the head founder, sometimes doesn't realize that what they are really in is a salesperson for a dream and for a vision.
Yeah. So first off, I agree with what you just said, but I'm still going to play devil's advocate for a different reason, right?
Yeah.
So I run into a lot of companies where, in fact, almost every company I run into, they don't really understand the value of what it is they deliver to their customers,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so it's almost like the successful companies, what they did was they built something, they found out that someone wanted to buy it. They figured out, oh, yeah, if we tweak this or add this, you'll pay me a little bit more. And they kept doing that. But they never really understood what the heck they were doing in terms
Yeah.
of the value to the customer.
Absolutely agree.
And so if this is true, how do we expect an entrepreneur before they launch the product to figure out what the value of their product is?
Yes. Because the alternative is that they burn hundreds of thousands of dollars on something that they were guessing at, and then pushed, shoved, fought, and argued with the developers. I come from a software context, so that's who's fulfilling these things, who's building these products. Um, and overbuilt and questionable value and all of that, because they didn't do the first few steps, because they were, if I could, like, they were so arrogant to say, well, I know the answer here.
In a
And
lot of ways, when you think about Agile and MVPs,
yeah,
right, this works really well. I mean, that
yeah,
whole theory works really well that says, hey, I don't really know if there's value, but let me go build something quickly and see if someone likes it.
yep. We're gonna build it for a week or two, and then we're gonna put it in front of customers and
Mhm.
say, does this help? I am a huge advocate of that. And um, because my background is in professional services, I have seen time and time again the way that you can. Customers don't really care how their problem is solved, especially if they are like highly frustrated and really just struggling, like any relief, any port in a storm, right? And so they don't care that your product is perfect, just that it helps. And you don't even need to build a product. What you need to do is just give them some attention and be the person who is taking ownership of solving that. And that could be throwing some person at it literally for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, and just say, hey, Dave is going to help you out. And yeah, we'll, whatever we charge. Uh, this time around, and then from that, suddenly there's somebody in your organization, when in the entrepreneur organization, with direct understanding of how to solve it, all of the constraints and all of the details, that now we have enough information to be able to automate, to be able to direct a software engineer to build uh, all of that. And I think without that direct experience, you're just guessing.
Yep.
And so going after, delivering the value as a service as the starting point, and then sort of tie this back to pricing. I don't think the pricing changes, because that problem, the value of solving that problem, is persistent for that client organization, however it's solved.
Yep.
Whether it's a person or a software or what have you. It's just the question is, which delivery method is going to be most reliable? Which delivery method is going to be most consistent? Which one is going to be most approachable?
Or even scalable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have two other topics I want to make sure that we cover on this. So the next topic is talk to me about your framework. So you call it the pricing from the start framework.
Yeah.
And is that what we've been talking about, or is that slightly different than what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's what we're talking about. It's about qualitative customer research to understand what it is your customers are trying to achieve and how the problem that you're helping them address fits into that. To be able to say, you're trying to get more sales in this way, or you're trying to cut costs in this way, or you're trying to um, increase collaboration between these kinds of stakeholders, whatever that may be. You're trying to get more leads, whatever that may be. And uh, I articulate it as there is a persistent, timeless problem that your customer is trying to solve, and that problem doesn't change with technology. How it can be addressed may change with different technologies, but the problem itself is timeless, which means it can be solved in a bunch of different ways. And understanding and defining what that is. And then once we understand what that is, what that problem is, and as you and I touched on at the beginning, sometimes this is articulated as jobs to be done. Uh, what is the job to be done that I am struggling with, and that then has in that client organization there is a window of value that says below which we don't think this solution can help us, above which it just costs too much and doesn't make sense for our organization. And finding that window, and I think that also stays consistent against the job to be done. It's the obligation of the vendor is to say, can I deliver a solution that works within that window?
Yep. Okay, so you brought up the third topic I want to talk about, and and that is jobs to be done. And I'm okay if we iterate back and forth
Yeah.
and circle around to all of these things as we go through this conversation. I'll be totally honest. I have been thinking about pricing in terms of solution, problem, result, and value. Right. So this is in my third book, Selling Value.
Yep.
Solution is your feature. You built a feature to solve a problem. If somebody has the problem and they use your solution, they get some result, which I think of as a KPI. In B2B, I think of it as a KPI. And if we can move a KPI, that makes money for the company. How much money do we just make for the company?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So this is really logical and methodical for me.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking this way for a while. I documented it a few years ago. And then you've got this popularity of something called jobs to be done. And I honestly have not been able to figure out what's different. Because when someone says to me, oh, this is the job to be done, I can almost always turn around and say, yeah, we solved this problem to achieve this result. And so, maybe it's the exact same thing. Maybe it's different. I want to know.
I see a lot of, especially early stage entrepreneurs, but early stages can be later than that as well. Who are developing solutions that are very technology forward and kind of hey, look, we can now use this technology to address this problem. Isn't that clever and neat? And aren't we all so smart? But if you compare that technology forward solution against maybe something that is more tried and true, something that has been around a while, the outcome is less with the newfangled solution because it has so many prerequisites, and it's sort of like, wow, we were able to get a bear to dance. Isn't that great? Yes, but it's not pretty. Um, how I think about jobs to be done relative to just solving or defining the problem is that timeless, persistent nature of jobs to be done. I think there are only a small handful of jobs that businesses have that are persistent and ongoing, and there are a multitude of ways that they can be addressed. And uh, one of those is, those are jobs to be done, and our solution addresses those in a specific way. I think my my resistance to just calling it a problem is the triteness that so often I see in early stage entrepreneurs trying to assert their next big thing. If we zoom out a little bit with a little bit of perspective, that's their new thing is much more about the delivery than it is about the outcome, and it becomes less small because all of the prerequisites we need to have in place against articulating that problem. So to me, it's more about shifting to a persistent, timeless problem definition than just a problem definition.
Okay. But by the way, I've never heard that phrase before. That was really good. I liked it a lot. Um, so one of the things that I think about, I'm in the middle of writing another book. I call it context-driven pricing, and it's about what's the context. And to
Yeah.
me, when I'm thinking about context, the first thing I care about is what's the market segment I'm going after.
Yes.
And I define those market segments by the problems that we solve. And when I say the problems we solve, I could put your definition of jobs to be done in there.
Yep.
But I call them foundational problems.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Great. I think that's fine.
There's a layer of really important problems, and then there's little detailed problems.
Yeah.
So almost every company, if you think about any feature you put in a product, you put that in because it solved a problem. Now, the question is that a detailed problem or is that a foundational problem?
Yes.
And so you can jump to one of my favorite companies to talk about is LinkedIn. Not that I know anything about it other than what I can read, right? But LinkedIn solves a foundational problem for recruiters to help them find and attain or attract new possible employees, right? So you've got to get it. So what are some of the detailed problems? I've got to get a whole bunch of different people inside my company to interview the same person, to provide reviews or feedback so I know this is the right person. Right? I need to find people that have the qualifications we really want. And right, I mean, so there's all these detailed problems we care about, but they're not the foundational problem.
Right. Yes. And any given product has some gerrymandering of all of those, so both the foundation and the detailed problems. We address the foundational one. There's some gerrymandering of the detailed ones that this particular product addresses, whether it's because that's that's the priority of the development team, or that's what the early stage customer segments were going after and demanded the most. Whatever it is, that gerrymandering means every given solution is imperfect. And that's the other key component to me about jobs to be done, is the assumption that every possible solution has strengths and weaknesses, has trade-offs, and which one fits us the best. And the gaps in any given solution are the opportunities for the next, are opportunities for innovation.
Yep. Yeah, and so I think that's why I don't like jobs to be done, or why it confuses me, because the next layer below market segment I think of as I'm going to build a product portfolio.
Okay.
Right. So if we go back to LinkedIn Recruiter, they've got good, better, best recruiter packages. Right. So what features did I put in better that I didn't have in good? And are those foundational problems that I'm solving, or are those because you happen to be a little bit bigger of a company, or, you've got a different type of corporate architecture, or right? So to me, every one of those, I can go back to the problem, but I have a really hard time with saying, hey, what's the job to be done here?
Okay. I think that this is fun. I would
Hopefully
say,
it's fun for our listeners too.
yeah, that's right. Let's get really esoteric here. Um, I would say, if we stick with the LinkedIn recruiter example, foundational problem, core job to be done is uh, a source of potential employees, a source of qualified employees for a given role, easy access. And that's very easy for me to say, timeless, persistent problem. Whether or not LinkedIn exists, recruiters, companies have this problem. Where am I going to find potential employees? And I would say that if we jump forward to the kind of packaging and tiering that you just described, that packaging and tiering is much more about what is the gerrymandering that is going to fit a given customer segment. My favorite example is things like single sign-on or HIPAA or any kind of SOC 2 compliance. There is a organizational size below which none of that matters, but above which is integral and you absolutely have to have it. And so it doesn't belong in the lower tiers at all. And if it doesn't have a call for a quote with salesperson in the tier that it has it in it, they're doing it wrong.
Yep. So I agree completely. Do you think single sign-on belongs with jobs to be done? Could I use jobs to be done to describe single sign-on?
I have a really difficult time with, I'll back up half a second and restart.
Mm-hmm.
Floating around in the universe, on the internet right now, is a jobs to be done canvas, jobs canvas. I forget exactly what it's called. And I'll tell you, like everybody, like so many, I am a sucker for consolidating a complex concept onto a one pager. Absolutely. So I took a look at it and I kicked it around a little bit. And in it, it has this notion of secondary jobs or ancillary jobs or whatever, basically non-foundational problems. And I have a real difficult time with that because I think that it no longer qualifies as a job to be done because it is so much about delivery and so much about it's so much about a specific fulfillment of a problem or solving of a problem in a specific way that I can't call it timeless and persistent anymore. And so therefore to me it doesn't qualify. It becomes more of it's a feature, I guess. Yeah, I'm happy calling those things features that are going to be more or less attractive to different customer segments.
Okay, I got to tell you, Garrick, I think you're upsetting every jobs to be done person out there right now. I just want you to know that. So now I'm going to ask the classic jobs to be done question or example.
Yeah.
When McDonald's created their milkshake,
Yeah.
were they sitting there thinking, what's the classic job? When someone's driving to work, they want to be able to drink a milkshake, right?
I think I'm so glad you brought this up. I think one of those problematic things, or one of the things that has hampered adoptions of and understanding of jobs to be done, has been that example, because I don't think it articulates clearly what it's a fun story. It's an interesting story. It makes you think about the world differently, which is great. But what does it tell me about jobs to be done? And what does it tell me? How do I repeat that? Not just repeat that story, but apply the learnings of that in other contexts? And I think it does a really poor job of that. What I take from that story is your competitive set is wider than you think. And that, I think, really drives how I think about both products, solutions, jobs to be done, pricing, all of those things. Like, to think, we need to expand our thinking of what kinds of solutions solve this problem, I think is great. And that's how you get to really innovative products. If you say, and then you can, and one of which could be, a milkshake for breakfast. But
So can I say
yeah,
I have never found a situation where I couldn't describe it in problems and results. But I'll find
and
lots of situations that I have a really hard time with jobs to be done with.
I am very self-conscious about using the phrase "jobs to be done" um, around people that I'm not confident are familiar with it. I think it's too much lingo in a way that, like you were just saying, problems and results and solutions are not lingo. And I think that's a good thing.
So let me, I'm going to try to defend jobs to be done for a second.
Yeah,
Just because I love this conversation, by the way. Absolutely love it. Um, People care about outcomes
yeah,
and what the results are.
yes,
And I got to say that as I work with clients and talk to people, probably the single hardest thing for someone to do is to describe the problem that they're solving.
yeah,
And so let's say, for example, that I drink a milkshake every day when I go to work. I may not be able to say, oh, here's the problem I was solving. I could just say, hey, I enjoy drinking a milkshake on my way to work. And when I get there, I feel good about it.
yeah.
So I could describe the outcome better than I could describe the problem. But it turns
Yeah.
out until we can step back and describe the problem, it's really hard to say, here's what the optimal solution should be.
Um, I have I spent some time inside a corporate accelerator where my role was find and take and translate the innovative ideas that my coworkers have and turn them into new products, new solutions, blah, 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 blah. And that is where I did the bulk of my jobs to be done work, especially sort of just formative of it. And where it helped me the most is translating a really cool idea into something with a customer outcome. So much so that when I work with early stage entrepreneurs or any kind of early stage idea, the immediate place that I go, I've got a single sentence now. I'll take any idea and I apply it into this sentence just to see, does it hold up? And the sentence is, I help adjective, role at, I screwed it up. I help role at adjective company struggling with timeless persistent problem. And so that reminds us that we're helping address some problem with a specific, for a specific person within a specific context. And that person is looking for some kind of relief or outcome. And if it's so many times you talked to a founder and tried to like suss out like pieces to fill into that sentence, and I don't know what problem you're going after. Like it's neat and that sounds like fun, and I know you're delighted by it. But if I flip it around and look at it from the customer's perspective, I don't know what I'm getting, and I don't know what kind of expectations of results to put against this.
Yep. Yep. I get that completely. Garrick, this has just been a blast. I love this. Um, I feel like we should somehow turn this back to pricing for a second. So tell me, tell me what you do in terms of helping clients. Who do you
Yeah.
typically look for? Who do you typically work for?
Uh, I typically work for CEOs, CMOs, in B2B SaaS companies that are at an inflection point in their organization. Sometimes that inflection point is they're within a PE private equity portfolio, and they need to figure out how what is willingness to pay, how can we credibly increase overall top line profits. Sometimes they're outside of that, and suddenly they're no longer about just how do we maximize fees, but it's more about how do we really delight customers, and how do we find that combination of value that's going to make enthusiastic advocates and retain those customers. And sometimes I'm talking with earlier stage saying, okay, we're going after bigger companies, bigger customers. How do we get out of our own way and understand what how our solution is valuable to this big company in a way that smaller companies with smaller budgets just aren't able to give us a sense of. And oftentimes I'm sitting in on sales calls with my clients or conducting customer research conversations with my clients to be able to get at the foundational problems, the jobs to be done, where their solution is strong, where it falls down. And what I love about the B2B context is we can fairly quickly go, presuming we're going after a foundational problem, we can very quickly understand how that problem fits into all of the problems that their clients are trying to solve to make their business successful. And then we can quantify it. And I think that's also one of the missing pieces in so much is that quantification, that notion of a value window that I talked about before, is across all of the things, across the size of this organization, what is this solution worth to them? I like to think in percentages, right? It's worth 2% of their overall revenues for the year. It's worth 10% of revenues for the year. And because I think that starts to also tell us, are we actually going after a meaningful enough problem to these people? And if it's only, I don't know, 0.05% of their overall revenues, does it even really matter? And that can help us sort of get out of our own way to say, okay, we're actually going after a foundational problem here for a lot of important, for a lot of substantial businesses, and we can really help.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things I heard you say, which I love, is the fact that we can quantify value. And I often say in B2B, we measure value by incremental profit.
Yeah.
How much more money am I going to make you as a company?
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
can't do that, you're actually not adding value to the B2B company. So,
the example that I share in this, when I first sort of wrapped my head around how to get at quantifying this value, was a client project similar to that. Like, my client had a solution, and their customers, it would increase profitability for them. And because we were so tied into operationally how those people worked, it was really, really easy to get at just exactly how much more profitable they could be on an annual basis by using this software. And by my calculations, it was exactly 10, like they were charging exactly 10% of what that overall value was. And I was like, I don't know if you guys are doing this consciously, but that is the maximum that I would recommend. Oh, and you're getting pushback on how high your prices are. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, right? Let's find a way to rearticulate or recombine or rebundle to make that more approachable, because I would argue that that it's almost not worth it, because it's 10% of what that incremental profit is going to be over the year. That, like, if it was down to 7 or 6, it'd be a whole lot more attractive.
yep. Yeah. I usually recommend start at 10% or think
Yeah.
about 10%.
Yeah.
And then if you can reduce risk, as in there's no risk in this, then
Yep.
you can move up in that number.
Yep. Totally agree. Totally agree.
I've heard numbers as high as 50%. Please don't go do that. I'm talking to my listeners.
Yeah.
You've got to be awesome, or if I were selling you a gold bar, guess what? There's very little risk. I'm not selling it to you at 10% of its value.
Yeah. So I sort of think of it as like 5 to 10 on cost savings, and somewhere 5, maybe you can go to 15 if you're like really directly going after new revenue. And it's clear and obvious how you're going to help them get net new revenue. But I think 10% is just a really good place to start.
Yep.
Both from price, but also a segmentation. If we're gonna capture 10% of value and we're gonna charge, I don't know, $10,000 a year, that means that somebody's expecting $100,000 worth of value in that year against this kind of problem. Who who has who has the problem so big that they can make another $100,000 off of it, and probably plus that, and they're making at least that already. So yeah, let's say it's an organization that is already making $1 million a year on this problem, is how I think about it. And so like, okay, well, who are those people and how do I get in front of them?
Yep. All right, that's great. Garrick, this has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for your time. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Garrick van Buren. You can also find me at pricingfromthestart.com.
Perfect. And to our listeners, thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And if you have any questions or comments about the podcast, or if your company wants to get paid more for the value you deliver, email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.
Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.